7 days till we get ready to go to Columbus, Ohio, and that's where everybody has to win, right? It's not offense and defense. So I was really pleased with the work today. I'll open up the questions.
Marcus, with just 4 practices left, including the blue gold game, what's kind of on the top of your to-do list to get done the next couple of weeks?
Well, what we'll do is we'll evaluate, hey, what situational football do we need to really get on film? I know we don't have enough third down plays on film from practice. We need to focus on some more third down. But I'll get with the coordinators and we'll really sit down and say, okay, hey, what situations do you need on your side of the ball, offensively and defensively, into the game situations that we need to make sure we get on film so that we can teach and coach from it. We're gonna have to. I wasn't pleased with the way we kicked today. We missed a couple field goals, so I want to put those guys in a little bit more competitive situations. But other than that, we'll evaluate as a staff, and again, we'll end with the spring game.
What's Al Golden's impact been on your team so far, and what's his impact been on you personally?
I'll start with me. He's been great. That's one of the main reasons we hired him, because not the main reason, but a big reason why we hired him was because he's been in my shoes, and he's been a guy that sees things from a head coach point of view. There's been many times he's come into my office and said, hey, just something to be aware of, something, hey, that I did when I was head coach. And it's something that it's been very beneficial for me being a first-time head coach. On the team, he's been great. I sit in a lot of his defensive unit meetings, and just to learn, just to hear him teach, and he's a great motivator. He's super intelligent. Our players, I'll tell you, they've learned a lot of ball. And, it's funny, we were having practice the other day, and Coach Reese was like, hey, are our linebackers, really intelligent? It's like this everywhere? And I'm like, no, they just are learning things that I didn't teach them last year. They're learning situations, they're learning alignments and stuff. Coach Golden is extremely intelligent, has coached a lot of ball, and he's doing a great job.
When we talked to Coach Mason a little while ago, he mentioned some of the people he was looking at punt returner. We didn't ask him about kickoff return. Is there some candidates there that you're looking at?
Yeah, Chris Tyree is really good. He did a good job last year. He'll be the guy. I think we'll obviously try to make sure he's the guy. But Brandon Joseph has done it too. He's obviously done some punt returning. So I know Brandon Joseph and Matt Salerno both were back there returning punts today.
Go to Tim in the middle.
Coach, you've talked in the past about wanting 1A and 1B as opposed to 2s. I'm curious this spring, and especially now that you've had this big scrimmage, have you seen a few guys that jumped up from, you viewed them maybe as 2s to that 1A pushing 1B type thing? Yeah,
I look at the DB position, right? The safety position, that's a deep group, right? You talk about Houston and DJ and Brandon Joseph and Ramon and Xavier. That group will have a 1A and 1B for sure. And it's something going into the spring you probably didn't know. The D-line is extremely deep, and that's with Jason not practicing, but with Foskey and Justin and Howard Cross has had an unbelievable spring. An unbelievable spring. And he's done a great job, and Lacey, and I can go on and on. But I think the depth of our middle, right? Up the middle, we're really deep, especially defensively, from the D-line to the linebackers to the safeties. Right up the middle, we're deep. We have to continue to develop some young guys. With Cam's out at corner, so we got to develop some young guys at corner. The O-line, I wouldn't say we're 1As and 1Bs yet, but I'm really pleased with some of those 1As. And so, again, the running back position would never be. I think up the middle, we're really strong, and we have to continue to develop on the edges.
Kind of on a related note, Lindsey mentioned when we spoke with him that he doesn't really view they're freshmen now, but they're about to be sophomores. He doesn't really think of them as needing leadership as much as on the field as much as they did last year, and they've really come along. What have you seen from that trio, so Styles, Thomas, and Colsey?
Yeah, I think Coach Stuck has done an unbelievable job with that group, just wanting to earn their trust. Right? It's about earning your trust first and then coaching them, make them better football players. But I've seen them all progress. We had a couple injuries where, Cozy was out early, then he came back, and JT's been fine. But Styles, he was limited on Thursday, so some other guys had to step up. They're getting a lot of reps, and I've been really pleased. I think, but leadership's always needed, right? I I don't love the comment maybe that they don't need it. No, leadership's always needed, and peer leadership is more important than anything. So I'm going to continue to challenge him. When I see Lindsey, I'm going to challenge him to continue to be an on-field leader.
We'll go to Pete up front.
Marcus, you've talked about sort of the staff coming together, and that was such a big focus of the last couple months. What are the markers you've seen over the last few weeks that make you feel confident, like, all right, this staff has good cohesion? Not only do I have good teachers, but I have good teachers who work well together.
I think the first thing that sticks out is when I go into the O and D unit meetings. I'm really, really pleased with the way Coach Reese and Coach Golden really just, they challenge their sides of the ball. You know, they're speaking the same language. They're speaking similar language that I speak, and that's what you want to see. You want to see everybody in your program all emphasizing the same things and then tailoring it towards their specific schemes. But, man, I've been really, really happy in those unit meetings. And then we meet as a staff every day. That's something we haven't done in the past, and it's very intentional, right, is to make sure that we are becoming a unit. Our coaching staff has to be a unit that trusts each other and that lean on each other and realize we all have each other's back. So that's something that's been very intentional on my end, is we're going to meet as a unit. Meet as a staff. We're going to talk through things, you know, and it could be a 5-minute staff meeting. It could be an hour staff meeting, but it won't be because of lack of communication, a lack of trust amongst the coaches.
When do you do that? Is that the same time every day? What in terms of the staff meeting?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same time every day. Yeah, 10.
It's like 10 a.m.?
No, it's not the first thing we do in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, you know, the practice days are a little bit different in terms of when we can get together, but non-practice days we usually get together at 10 o'clock.
I think there are only so many ways you can structure a practice, but how have you been able to sort of put your stamp on practice formats? You know, you talked about sort of the compete periods a little bit. What are some other ways that you've sort of changed up the day-to-day on-field stuff?
Well, I'm a routine guy, right? And so I like to script them all out and just say, let's every day have the same routine. But then you have a practice like Tuesday. I wasn't happy with the way we practiced Tuesday. Thought we got the work in, but we got through it. And so when you get through things, you say, okay, how can we change something up to make sure we get their attention? So Thursday was a little bit different. We started off with a competitive opener. We put O-line versus D-line one-on-ones, and then we did wideouts versus corners one-on-one, and then we had some coaches catching punts, and it's just, we had to change it up. And sometimes to me, it's you set your routine, but you got to be able to gauge, like, what does this team need? Tuesday wasn't a great practice, so I'm going to go challenge them on Thursday, right? I'm going to get in front of the room. I'm going to challenge them and tell them we can't have an average practice. But also my head is going to be like, okay, how can you slightly change things up so it's something new to them?
That answer begs for a follow-up question of which coaches tried to catch punts, and did they actually catch them?
Every coach caught them. I would never ask Coach Heastan to catch one. The only one that dropped one was Ronnie, who's our analyst. Who is Ronnie? Ronnie is our senior analyst on defense or junior analyst, one of those. Yeah.
And lastly, you'd referenced sort of Al Golden and sort of his advice of like, hey, when I was a head coach, are those conversations more geared towards like, hey, when I was a head coach, I drove into this pothole, you can avoid it? Or is it, hey, this really worked for me, which he has some advice on some things to change in more of like, I guess, a positive realm?
Both of them.
Okay.
Both of them. There's times I go to him and say, hey, have you been in this situation? What did you do? And then there's times he comes to me and says, hey, just a heads up, here's something that I did when I was a head coach. And it works both ways. You know, I'm utilizing him as much as, he's giving me suggestions. And so it's been very beneficial.
Mark.
Go ahead, John.
Marcus, just wanted to get your impressions of the quarterbacks. What have you seen today? What have you seen this spring? Where do you think they are right now?
Really, really pleased today. The only way to win the jersey scrimmage is takeaways. Only way. And so up until the second to last series, the offense didn't turn the ball over one time, and then we ended up having a pick late in the scrimmage. But by that time, the offense was way ahead. So I was really, really pleased with the work that they did today of taking care of the ball, making good decisions. It's a great competition, especially between Tyler and Drew. It is. And it's one that probably after this jersey scrimmage, I'll sit down with Tommy and kind of say, hey, give me your grades. Let's talk about where you see these two. And it's still going to be an evolving process in terms of until you name a starter. But I wouldn't hesitate to put either two in the game because they're both really, really good football players and they can help us win. And so I look forward to sitting down with Coach Reese and kind of really just looking at it from the quarterback's point of view from, hey, did they make the right decision and then did they execute? You know, and so it's been really good.
We'll stay up front with John Bryce.
Hey, Marcus, piggybacking on Pete's question a little bit, what are the cumulative benefits of those staff meetings that you have daily? And then what kind of example do you think that sets for the players, and how can they benefit from those?
I mean, it starts with everybody being on the same page, right? And in a lot of those staff meetings, we go over, right now, you go over the practice schedule, right? You go over recruiting, you go over any points of emphasis you need to hit, you know? And so we know everybody in their schedule has a block to make sure we get together. There might be days I text them and say, hey, we don't need to have a staff meeting. But I want us to all be in a routine of, hey, every day at this time, let's plan to get together. I don't know how long it will be, but I think when you have a group of a lot of new people or people that maybe have been here, the ability to get together, spend time with each other, and talk about things is so important. How can you trust people if you don't spend time with them? And that's the type of leader I am. I'm a teammate. And so if I want these guys to trust me, I need them to be around me. And we have honest conversations. Sometimes it's just strictly boom, boom, here's the practice schedule, here's the daily schedule, we're on the same page. And sometimes we sit and we say, okay, here's the expectations. Here's things that we have to make sure we're on the same page and we all have to be speaking the same language. And so it can depend on what is needed for that day.
And then a little bit of a different question here, maybe a little bit early, but from an analytics standpoint, whether it's tracking the guys on GPS and some of those metrics, how have you began to implement analytics this spring, and kind of what's your view on the utilization of analytics?
Every day after practice, I get with Coach Bayless, and we look at the GPS systems and, hey, who's in red, who has high value numbers. And so I told the staff on Thursday, like, every number right now is above where it's been. And so it's great. It's showing that their workload can increase, but then all of a sudden they can sustain it if you continue to do it. Like, we haven't had those small tissue strains, but it's a credit to me to being able to look at the analytics, right? Look at their workload, but also push them to get treatment, right? And that, hey, he's in red. But usually we say, be careful. Well, guess what? He hit the same workload the next day, and he's fine. You know, Braden Lindsay is the first person I think about. I mean, his workload has increased, and it's just shown over the 10 practices or 11 practices that, hey, he just needs pushed. And he's been great. His body can handle it, you know. And so we study it every day and every post-practice. And then in terms of on-the-field analytics, we've been meeting about. I met with the company that does ours, and you know, it's continue to learn. Me and Tom are going to spend a lot of time together in terms of, you know, how much we'll use them. But there's a lot of situational football analytics can show you in terms of ways to improve.
And we'll stay in the front with Patrick Ingle.
Marcus, you mentioned sitting in on Al in some of the defensive meetings. What are some of the ways you notice that he teaches or how he deals with guys in those settings that have kind of stood out to you and left you with that impression?
You know, Al's a guy that has a lot of energy. You know, he's a guy that is very, very intelligent. He's really organized. So when you sit in his meetings, right, you feel, okay, what's the message of this meeting? What's the point he's trying to get accomplished? Then you watch the film that he shows. It can be examples from Notre Dame. It can be examples from the NFL. But it's the ability you can't just get in front of a room and just start talking. Right? You can't present. We said we don't present. Don't just get up there and start talking. Like, there's got to be an atmosphere of, okay, they're engaged. Because if you get up there and just start talking and say, hey, I just want to get these words out, well, 3/4 of people aren't paying attention. Okay? And so it's about, bam, setting the tempo, setting the mode. Like, hey, it's meeting time, right? And however you want to do that as a coach, okay, here's the things I want to get across by words, or it could be we want to teach how do we want to defend a screen. That was one of his meetings the other day. Okay, let's set the tempo. Let's set the mode of this meeting. Let's then set the agenda. We're going to talk about how to defend screens, show them examples from practice, and then show them good and bad examples, and show them good and bad examples or really good examples from the NFL. And so it's all a method. And it's been really good to see from my chair, just taking notes and being like, hey, man, those are great points. And to see how it's implemented, man, has been really good.
To use the term, what makes and what does it take to be a good mode setter, I
Yeah,
guess.
sometimes the mode needs to be you have to get everybody's attention. You got to raise your voice, right? You got to call some people out. Or it's like, hey, these guys are locked in. You know, let's make sure, hey, relax. A lot of times in the D unit meetings, he walks in and they say, hey, everybody hug each other, stand up, give somebody a 5. And it's like, okay, that's what the meeting needs. You know, it's the same thing when you're the head coach. What does this meeting need? What does the culture of this meeting need to be, right? What's the atmosphere need to be? And that's something that I think all these coaches can just, you figure it out before the meeting, what you think that meeting's going to need.
And then you mentioned the changing some things up out of the routine. Was that kind of a specific way where you were able to use Al's experience having run practice to say, how do you get out of a routine, or what's the right button to push there?
It's the same thing when you're running a linebacker group, right? It's that you have a routine, you have a plan, but every day you adapt and you adjust to what's necessary for the group, right? It's not a head coaching thing, it's a teaching thing, it's a leader thing. If you're in charge of a room, you're in charge of a defensive unit or offensive unit, you're in charge of a team, it doesn't matter. You have to understand what is needed for that group for that day. And if you didn't like what you got the day before, well, you better change some things up so you get a different outcome.
And that is the last question. So thanks, Coach, for joining us.
All right, thanks, guys.